For decades now, video games have been used to retell past conflicts with such visceral and interactive mechanics that no other medium can replicate, allowing players to gain insight into these historical events. The Afghanistan and Iraq War were two very different, controversial, but highly important conflicts of the 21st century whose impacts will be felt for decades to come. During this period in the early 2000s, a wave of military-themed games helped glorify the efforts of modern armies for varied quality. One of these games was Pandemic's 2004 Full Spectrum Warrior that tried to bring an infantry simulator to the home consoles. Full Spectrum is a clunky and occasionally buggy game that is fortunately saved through its dedication to detail, environment, and authenticity, something I'll always miss Pandemic for. Full Spectrum takes place in the fictional country of Zekistan, where a US and NATO task force enter the capital city to oust the terrorist funding regime of Al-Afad. The entire game takes place across a single day from morning to night as you clear blocks of the city, assist fellow allies, secure positions, and mostly kick ass by your two well-equipped squads, Alpha and Bravo. Unlike other military sims, your troops are personalized through different attitudes and quirks that add a surprising level of grit to the world. Troops will curse when under fire, make small talk, and even reflect on the war at large. It may seem campy to have them act like this, but the contrast of the serious, professional nature of the officer corps. Like in most wars, the average grunt is just a fresh-faced recruit, led by experienced and dedicated soldiers that stay calm when under pressure. Having soldiers show either remorse, apathy, or total disregard for their dead enemies is a meaningful touch in an otherwise storyless game. The occasional cutscenes are used to relay objectives and reports. There's little narrative action outside of that. That's fine, as the real focus is delivering an authentic experience of modern urban warfare. You don't control individual soldiers, rather two fire teams consisting of 4 Marines each, which you issue commands to, primarily movement to cover and firing at a position. In the simplest understanding, you use the squads to cover and support each other as you gradually move from position to defeating the opposition. The game displays an early form of cover mechanics, as well as cover degradation, as different pieces of the environment offer better or worse protection. Cars and crates crumble under fire, while walls and stones stay in place. Without cover, you'll die very quickly, so carefully flanking an enemy while not being too exposed and they're being suppressed is key to survival. You shoot by highlighting an area via circular reticle, after which your squad lays into it with a cacophony of noise. This will largely prevent enemies from shooting back, but it also works in reverse. When under fire, it's much harder and dangerous to attack. That's why you use another squad to flank the enemy and take them down. There's both smoke and fragmentation grenades, which are useful in clearing enemies from cover and creating a screen to move through. They work nicely, albeit inconsistently, which is pretty lame. Be aware you have limited resources that can only be refilled by allied convoys, with some levels not even having them. This is a fairly straightforward system with minimal frills, accommodating the tasks you're assigned. It's all grunt work, but it makes sense. You're just foot soldiers. In the grand scale of things, you're unimportant. When you do encounter special forces, like rangers, you're mostly covering their back while they save the day. This can be tedious as you hoof across the semi-barren maps, but the ever-present threat of snipers retains the tension throughout. No street or corner isn't a risk, and rushing through will lead to high casualties, with more than 2 resulting in a game over. If one of your soldiers becomes incapacitated, they'll need to be extracted to a medevac for help. This is pretty annoying. You can't lose units like in Ghost Recon or Rainbow Six, where you can take it in stride, but it does lead to a more streamlined experience. Even when you do fail, it isn't much of a hassle. Checkpoints are liberally placed after even minor objectives, so risk-taking is acceptable, even encouraged sometimes. Unfortunately, most of my failures weren't a result of the enemy outthinking me or poor judgment, rather than the lacking design and bad AI pathfinding the main culprits. While it mostly works, the cover-based combat is very linear and arbitrary. An enemy can be completely exposed, but is technically in cover, so you just watch your guys uselessly spray away at point-blank range. It only reveals how little control you actually have over the game. Your troops can't quickly fire at an enemy, or freeze when processing simple orders, resulting in your immediate failure. The occasional glitches forcing a restart kills all sense of player engagement. This is why I'd recommend playing on the normal difficulty, otherwise it's far too tedious and annoying. In contrast to other action titles, you don't engage many enemies, maybe 2 or 3 per firefight. This is a shame, as a larger scale would have portrayed the conflict in a grander sense and allowed more interesting tactics. To be fair, guerrilla and insurgency engagements aren't known for large-scale battles, with the exception of Hue City, Fallujah, and Mosul. Still, the suspense of each and every battle remains throughout the game, through sound effects, voice acting, and graphical details like cartridges and debris breaking off everywhere. Because of these moments, I found playing Full Spectrum Warrior more interesting than enjoyable, as there are far better developed games like Armor or Brothers in Arms, where the militaristic simulation and believability made it worthwhile in spite of its frustrations and drawbacks. It's a shame that games like this aren't made anymore, at least from a single player perspective, so I recommend it to anyone interested in experimental action games or military enthusiasts who want a more grounded and modest tactical shooter.